Thank you very much, Ed. So to take it out of the realm of, again, on a slide, I'll tell you a bit of a story. So if you guys have been to the Scaling Enterprise Storage session that Pete Conway held earlier, and if you haven't, you can see the stuff we're talking about here at the booth. Our joint customers came to us and said, we need to prove this VDI solution at very large scales, 10, 20, 40,000 kind of seat environments. And Joe Tucci said, go forth and do. And so we said, yes, sir, as I want to do. We built this huge Center of Excellence lab in Santa Clara because the primary technology challenges around this and how do you scale it up are technology challenges that VMware is primarily solving, right? The infrastructure elements are part of it, but the huge parts of it are the VDM stack and the SVI capabilities that you've been learning about over the last couple of days. But if you take a look at it, we built this using the N generation, not the N+1 generation. And there's 450 ESX servers there to hit that scaling mark, right? And that's what they look like in the back. So even if you're using blades, you still basically have got this spaghetti in the back, right? And that TCO comparison is the analysis that we did to basically say, okay, let's start building this second iteration where we don't use VDM 2.1 and massive amounts of array snaps. We use VDM 3.0, SVI, use converged fabric, and deploy it that way because we're also hammering the network in this use case. When 10,000 clients boot, 10,000 clients all log into Outlook, right? I mean, Outlook, I don't know if you guys see this, it syncs up, you get 200 megabytes over the wire when you sync up your client, right? I mean, that's a real heavy workload, and you're consolidating that down in a very big way here. Now, what about Tier 1 apps? Getting ready for the N+1 generation, I'll give you my perspective. My perspective is I have yet to find the workload that I can't virtualize. Now, there's some very narrow exceptions, real-time, CPU, counter instances where it has to be a real-time app, but that's a very narrow use case. Usually what happens is people say, I can't virtualize Exchange, or I can't virtualize SQL Server, I can't virtualize SharePoint or Oracle. And first of all, if you didn't see it, Microsoft's SVVP program now officially certified VMware's infrastructure stack. So 3.5 Update 2 is now officially supported, right? I'm going to give you more details on each one of these. For those of you that are excited about the Oracle Best Practices and Performance session, I believe that EA 1961 has actually got an extra. That one overbooked, but I believe there's an extra session. It's a great topic. And I'm going to give you some highlights on each one of those. There's a really cool demo where we're doing Oracle 11 apps, SAP, with Site Recovery Manager failing over, live. So a very, very cool session to see. So let's look at Exchange first. Those are the links to Microsoft's, first of all, the official KB articles, but then also the Exchange team's blog. So they actually maintain a fantastic blog. But what's cool is that we started around, it was VMworld in Europe, I believe, yeah, right? I think you're right, yeah. Where we showed you could get double the user density on a virtual config than you could on a physical. It was 8,000 on a physical and 16,000 on a virtual, and built a template. And so we took that out and we tested it with all these advanced Exchange features, and customers loved it, except for one thing. They said, you guys aren't telling us how to do the network stack. So we're like, uh-oh, right? So picked up the phone, maybe we should do this together. And now it's been updated, and you can see that that's a screenshot of this document. And again, you can get this in detail at the booth. You can also get it on PowerLink if you're an EMC customer. And by the way, at the booth, there's also a DVD, a joint VMware EMC DVD that's got all of these best practices, joint testing results. The key thing is that it also shows where the solutions failed, because smart vendors tell you as customers, these are operational envelopes, right? And if you want to do more, here's how you do it. You need to know what the operational limits are of proper solution design. I'll give you another example, and that myth, by the way, busted. So yeah, it is supported, and yes, it works great. And yes, you can use every advanced Exchange feature that you'd like to see. Here's another one, Oracle myths. Oracle VM is the only way to go, not supported, it won't perform well, no para-virtualize something or other. This is the test that we did, and take a look at the performance. Once again, in the virtual was better than the physical, right? Now this isn't necessarily for every customer, because what we were doing here is we had a rack config and a single instance config. And that actually is Oracle's Metalink article comment in here. Whether you're Enterprise Edition or Standard Edition, single instance, okay, rack, no. But you can see that the cost per transaction in the configuration that we were comparing, it's more than 10 times more cost effective to get a certain level of transactions per second. And if you want more detail, you can go to this session, see all the details. And one thing that we're thinking about is right now the space and domain for this is, there's a difference between rack and single instance, right? And the rack does certain things that are very important for scale out and availability. You can do a lot of stuff with VMHA today. The whole fault-tolerant VM thing is going to make this space very, very interesting over the near-term future. So, myth busted. Next myth, big SQL I/O, not a candidate. On the left, we've got the virtual. On the right, we got the physical, right? So what did we find? We found that if you take a look at it, 180,000 clients, so we're talking big, right? The power saved relative to performance. The performance was equal to or better, VM versus physical, but expressed in terms of power savings, it was basically 80% or more efficient to do it as a virtual than a physical. And we tested this not only just with a workload, but this is, by the way, the detail that you can find in the docs, but what happens when you vMotion? And what happens when you have massive hardware failures? So that dip in there is where we basically failed half of the Clarion array, right? You can notice that no transactions were dropped, there was no interruption to service, performance dipped momentarily and then came right back, right? So these docs are produced not to create some sort of benchmarking, but real know-how, real best practices. There will never probably be an Uber framework that works for every customer. But what every customer that we're talking to is telling us is they want our frameworks to work a little more cohesively together, right? So working on three-way API integration with these different management frameworks is something that we're doing. But you can see that we were part, as EMC, of the vManagement vServices announcement that went out today. The press release talking about how we're part of that initiative based on the fact that all of our tools already integrate is something that we think is very, very important. So if 2 years ago we started to think about how does virtualization impact storage, and you guys were ahead of us 3 years ago, you started to think about how does virtualization affect networks, our management tool team, which is a huge part of EMC's business, started thinking about this at the same time. How do you redesign these products, thinking about that use case? If you want to see how the tools can work together, there's a great session, a joint VMware, a joint Cisco EMC session where we're talking about how vFrame and the storage management tools all tie together in a customer use case, along with Virtual Center and Orchestrator, and that basically sped up the whole provisioning stack of a VM. So in other words, not just provision the VM, but provisioning all of the network infrastructure and the storage infrastructure down to a minute or two, right? So that sort of thing can accelerate customers' business. There's another great session where you can see the tools on their own and more detail there. Now, this is still just the beginning, so let's talk about what's